Welcome back to part 4 of Abortion, Eugenics, the Satanic Not New World Order, and Natural Law Anarchy. It will be helpful for you to watch the entire series in order if you are new to the topic, but not absolutely necessary. To recap from part 3, this excerpt from Corbett Report can help.
Not surprisingly to those who have studied the confluence of eugenics, environmentalism, and technocracy that formed a nucleus of our exploration of why big oil conquered the world, the answer to the technocrats' imaginary problem is, once again, a global system of total control to implement the ultimate eugenics program of forced sterilization, forced abortion, and selective breeding.
In addition to the Corbett Report, I would also suggest Truth Stream Media for videos on conspiracy research. That's not the focus of my channel, which is why I put a lot of clips from other researchers, and just focus on the basics. My focus, of course, is philosophy, to understand how our philosophical misconceptions and ideological proxies creates the negative world we live in based in falsehoods. A few other books for research are Edwin Black's War Against the Weak, Eugenics and America's Campaign to Create a Master Race, Population Control, How Our Corporate Owners Are Killing Us by Jim Marrs, and By Their Fruits, Eugenics, Population Control, and the Abortion Campaign by Ann Farmer. In part 3, we saw how the politicians are tying the so-called population problem with global warming. Recall the Club of Rome's Limits to Growth report in the 1970s. Well, in the 1990s, in the first global revolution, it calls out the need to manufacture ecological crisis as the means for world government.
The common enemy of humanity is man, and searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which must be confronted by everyone together. But in designating these dangers as the enemy, we fall into the trap, which we have already warned readers about, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes. It is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself.
States the report.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3.
First, the headline. Berkeley declares a climate emergency. Here's the story. It's so bad, says the City Council, that a 6th mass extinction is coming. Life on Earth could be devastated for the next 10 million years. We must, therefore, humanely stabilize the human population.
When people say we don't believe in global warming, I say, no, I believe in global warming. I don't believe that human CO2 is causing that warming.
Each day, the news reports grow more fantastically apocalyptic. Politicians no longer dare to express any doubt about climate change.
There is such intolerance of any dissenting voice.
Are some of the worst climate criminals on the planet.
This is the most politically incorrect thing possible, is to doubt this climate change orthodoxy.
Global warming has gone beyond politics. It is a new kind of morality.
Now, the Prime Minister's back from his holidays, unrepentant and unembarrassed about yet another long-haul destination.
Yet, as the frenzy over man-made global warming grows shriller, many senior climate scientists say the actual scientific basis for the theory is crumbling.
There were periods, for example, in Earth's history when we had 3 times as much CO2 as we have today, or periods when we had 10 times as much CO2 as we have today. And if CO2 has a large effect on climate, then you should see it in the temperature reconstruction.
If we look at climate through the geological time frame, we would never suspect CO2 as a major climate driver.
None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by CO2.
We can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
I've often heard it said that there is a consensus of thousands of scientists on the global warming issue and that humans are causing a catastrophic change to the climate system. Well, I am one scientist, and there are many that simply think that is not true.
Man-made global warming is no ordinary scientific theory.
This morning, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change made up of...
It is presented in the media as having the stamp of authority of an impressive international organization.
From the IPCC,
the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
The IPCC, like any UN body, is political. The final conclusions are politically driven.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either. But that, whenever you hear that in science, that's pure propaganda.
The whole global warming business has become like a religion. And people who disagree are called heretics. I'm a heretic. The makers of this program are all heretics.
They're in control!
According to a report in WorldNet Daily, some of the richest men and women in the world met secretly in New York recently. When the world's wealthiest individuals hold secret meetings, it's time to pay attention. In 1910, the 6 wealthiest men in the world met at Jekyll Island, Georgia. That meeting resulted in the creation, 3 years later, of the largest criminal enterprise ever devised, the Federal Reserve, so-called. Judging from the list of participants, the recent meeting in New York may result in something even more monumental. The London Times identified them as Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, Ted Turner, Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, George Soros, and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Based on the Forbes magazine list of billionaires, the room had a net worth of about $120 billion. Microsoft's founder, Bill Gates, called the meeting. The London Times reported the informal afternoon session was so discreet that some of the billionaires' aides were told they were at security briefings. Discreet is the British way of saying secret. I do not believe that it is coincidental that this meeting came only a couple of weeks after another super secret and more powerful group met in the secrecy in Greece, the Bilderberg Group. They have advocated a one-world government for at least a century. They also see themselves as the elite saviors of mankind. According to the Times, the billionaires were each given 15 minutes to present their favorite cause. Over dinner, they discussed how they might settle on an umbrella cause that could harness their interests. Taking their cue from Gates, the report said they agreed that population control was the #1 issue. Experts say the global population will top 7 billion in 2012. According to reports at the meeting, Bill Gates outlined a plan to cap the global population at 8.3 billion. It all sounds so civilized, doesn't it? Here's the less politically correct but more accurate version. A group of unelected liberals with more money than many governments have just decided how many people will be permitted to live. This group of self-appointed governors will now have to draw up criteria to be used to decide who will not be permitted to live and how they will die.
In July's issue of Oprah's O magazine, the media mogul highlighted Amelia Bono and her activism for the pro-choice movement with the disturbing hashtag #ShoutYourAbortion.
This is the war on you! Ask yourself, why are billionaires behind this, funding the death of the most helpless and innocent of us all, the unborn? Once you get to the top of capitalism and win the fictitious money game for individual power and glory, the next game is political and collective, the pursuit of controlling all aspects of human life through social engineering and population control. Capitalism and socialism go hand in hand, like the masculine and feminine, and are the satanic game of the global elite cult. This is the competitive and satanic worldview of Darwinism. After being driven by material gain, one then seeks dominance over the rest of society, as the corruption of power only grows. Sadly, those at the top of our corrupt system are regarded as heroes and role models, when they are immoral trash, soulless, greedy, satanic, psychopathic, and power-hungry. In the larger global picture, these billionaire globalists and political elite are just pawns and slaves for the secret societies behind them and the dark occultists. For the entire system operates on mind control and nothing really real, as money and politics are constructs of the mind. Its hierarchical structure is totally contrived, but made real by belief. We do indeed live in the Matrix. The satanic worldview sees one as separate from the rest of humanity, competing against them, failing to perceive the spiritual oneness inherent in all beings. The more these individuals climb for power, the more they have hatred towards humanity, because the more superior they feel. And Satanism is about superiority, and psychologically we know this as the dual-ended complex of superiority and inferiority. This complex stems from self-loathing, insecurity, and the lack of self-knowledge. Because it involves unresolved past issues, it moves a person away from the moment now, and such prejudice prevents them from forming an accurate picture of the world. With no internal work, our perception of the world can only be projections, assumptions, and delusions based on our neurotic complexes. Thus, much psychological work is required to heal such complexes, to understand ourselves and the reality in which we live, as our own ego and shadow present a subjective matrix to be transcended and disidentified from. Each individual corresponds to the all. The one corresponds to the many. And so, understanding natural law, we recognize equality and embrace the fact that we are all at different points in the same journey home. The spiritual hierarchy is completely different than the materialistic one. It is not about superiority, it is about growth and evolution. Our journey begins and ends in the same place, so no individual unit of consciousness is superior than any other unit. Even the speck of sand will evolve into the infinite. Returning back to these elitists, don't buy their symbols of authority found in image, wealth, business suits, and global institutions. When they use the terms federation, international, and united, don't be fooled. This is all fascist socialism. Tyranny, government, a control system. They are mocking your own inferiority complex here. The global elitists depend on fear to maintain their new world order. Their fear porn of environmentalism, global warming, and overpopulation is used to get you to want them to control things for you, to save you.
So what's wrong with the population? I mean, we're too many people. That's why we have global warming.
The devil always wears the mask of philanthropy and humanitarianism. While it is true that we are destroying the environment, it is not because of the existence of humans. It is because of the immoral actions that humans are taking that are not in alignment with nature. Governments will use this to create systems that are even more out of alignment with natural law, as governments always pose as the solution to man's problems, which pushes him further away from individual responsibility. Control comes from fear, and the global elite are so deathly afraid of humanity, as there are billions more of us than them, and they have to invest in population control to ease their fear and assert their domination over us. Deep down, they are afraid of the truth. They know they are not really God, and that no matter how much they try to control things, there will always be an anomaly, because nature is not a machine. Free will can never be controlled, ultimately. They want less of us to lower the risk and possibility of anomalies and awakening. An awakened planet is their enemy. Every time a woman kills her baby, the global elite rejoice, because there is less of us and more of them. Satanists celebrate the blood sacrifice of inferior beings, just as we blood sacrifice animals, lower beings than us, for carnal pleasure. When we operate from fear, fear of loss, fear of death, fear of truth and reality, we seek to control. We seek to compensate for ignorance through sheer willpower. to never come face to face with our dark spirit. The scarcity in our hearts and souls manifests scarcity in our environment. People struggle to survive because there is a scarcity of the resource of the controlled fiction of money, not because of scarcity of food, water, shelter, and air. There is scarcity of truth in our minds, not scarcity of knowledge. There is the scarcity of care in our hearts, not the scarcity of love. The scarcity exists in our air, not in what is. But to discover what is requires the spiritual currency of time and attention, the true currency of consciousness. Because the materialist worldview can never be satiated, as material and social gain can never uncover the soul, the global elitists are afraid of losing their control over the world's resources. Even though they capitalize fully from this illusory scarcity construct, creating an economic differential that has produced third world poverty and starvation to a ridiculous degree. This artificial system is opposed to natural law, which is based in abundance for all, when morality is embodied. Government will be and always will be the antithesis to the good and can never be based on love. The nature of government is found on dominance and coercion through a monopoly on violence of order followers by a group of controllers, and what evolves through this paradigm can only be more evil. Governments will never be about peace, real human rights, generosity, or charity, and in the times that it is either for public relation or some ulterior motive. Governments will always be about some people restricting the rights and freedoms of other people, and this can be nowhere better illustrated than government precluding us the right to be born, the freedom to live. Governments are our limits to growth, our postmodern dystopia, restricting our access to abundant resources on the planet, enslaving us in a cage of their control, trying to burden us more each and every day when the quality of life should be getting better. No evolution is to be found. The Matrix is the restriction of evolution. The architects of the Matrix are the creators of perpetual war. They are the destroyers of peace, and because we support them, we are too. Because we refuse to look within to see our shadow, we are blind to the fact that we are on a farm, treated like farm animals, being ushered into the slaughterhouse. Maybe we should stop doing that to animals and live morally under the axiom, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We continue to be willing slaves because we don't want to know the difference between right and wrong, and we don't want to morally grow up. And so we contribute to the enormous suffering occurring all over the world as we prefer denial. We should not seek to control free will, but to use it to act in alignment to objective morality, because that is the path to freedom. And we cannot control others, but we do have the moral obligation to inform others of the difference between right and wrong, and we do have the right to defend ourselves from harm.
Mommy, please don't kill me.
While those in the womb have the right to defend themselves, they can't. They get cornered in the womb. Please do not forget Abby Johnson's story as she quit her job at Planned Parenthood when she saw the ultrasound of a baby fighting for its life before being suctioned up into the trash can. When we come from the opposite of fear, love, our consciousness and energy expands instead of contracts, and we are blessed by things and events we could have never dreamed of. We welcome growth, and we do not seek to control or manipulate it. We only seek to act in alignment to objective morality by understanding that growth requires that we do not harm other living beings. Freedom and growth go hand in hand, which is why free market capitalism has always been better than the planned economy of socialism. But capitalism is only the illusion of freedom as it merges into socialist governments, aka crony capitalism, through the mental construct of money, which is not a true resource in and of itself. Capitalism is based on the competition for selfish gain, rather than providing true value to the world. It's time that we stop equating financial success as moral goodness, and stop looking up to billionaires who have blood on their hands. It is time that we realize that those with the most financial success are doing the most evil in their attempts to reign over humankind. When we do things freely without creating harm, good things happen collectively. It is when we try to control freedom and create harm that negative conditions manifest collectively. This is how natural law works. It's so simple, but the mind control has made all these issues so complex, to use complexity as a weapon against the mind. We've all been living in a control system for thousands of years, and we can understand law experientially, even as it is the substance of true reason. All governments fail, and all man-made laws eventually legalize evil. Ultimately, we don't create order, we discover and align to the natural order, to natural law. We exist within nature and the divine. We are not the creators of nature and the divine. Our egos are not truth, and are always subordinate to the truth. Since the 1960s, we've lived under the paradigm that men ruled the world through patriarchy, oppressing women. But the men's rights movement has debunked many feminist assertions, like Warren Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power. Former feminist Cassie Jaye changed her mind about feminism in her documentary The Red Pill.
My education on gender politics was really just beginning. I learned about other sectors of the online manosphere, like MGTOW, men going their own way, and a forum on Reddit called The Red Pill, which is separate from the men's rights community, and they do not see eye to eye. I'm told an easy way to remember the difference is that while MRAs want to change the system, Reddit's The Red Pill want to take advantage of the system, and MGTOW want to leave the system. There are so many perspectives on gender, and I believe they are all worthy of listening to. However, the conversation is being silenced. For a society to accept anything said on behalf of women's rights, and then to shame any dialogue about men's rights and call it hate speech is precisely the problem. I don't know where I'm headed, but I know what I left behind. I no longer call myself a feminist.
Historically, men have been the laborers, inventors, and builders of society, have gone to wars, have dealt with the pressures of maintaining a household, and have put women's lives first, providing for and protecting women and children. To say women were oppressed is a gross mischaracterization, also given the fact that women have chosen and desired the traditional role. Now, I will be going into depth about this specific topic in a future presentation, as I am not advocating the traditional lifestyle necessarily as ideal. Women desiring to contribute to society as to expand themselves outside of the household is a positive thing, yet the illusions of the workplace need to be deconstructed as well as the evils of the monetary system itself to understand that most jobs are not what they are cracked out to be, and that men have been economic slaves longer than women. Due to the satanic hierarchical structure to society, employment has become wage slavery, and the corporations, the technology industry, media, and government have a hidden agenda to further enslave man, so our work is used against us. The perception of the workplace as a place of freedom and growth is not correct, but propaganda. For the workplace is one usually of following orders more than providing innovation and value. It is a self-serving system that is not based on humanity. Now, I just want to interject here that this topic really needs to be fleshed out, and I plan to do that work. But for now, I just want to say that real value and our monetary system do align here and there, which is why individuals can find ethical work. But that the system as a whole is immoral, so you receive the greatest gains from the system when you conform to its corruption. For example, the work here on my channel is 100% supported by donations, as there would be no job ever to support me for this work, for me to be able to speak truth so honestly and so full spectrum, without compromising myself to some monetary, social, or political agenda. Thus, to limit value to available jobs is hampered by the fictitious financial system that regresses our potential. Getting women to be envious of men's working lives, as well as resenting her role of motherhood, has been a deliberate eugenics mind control program, and not one of natural evolution of gender roles. When feminism promotes to be about equal rights between genders, this is a correct desire, as it is based in natural law, equality under the law. But this is not the type of feminism we see today in the Western world. It is the kernel of truth mixed with many lies.
In this video, I'm going to talk about the Satanic neo-feminist agenda. What is Satanic belief? It means to be adversarial or to be opposed to humanity. That is what the root word means, and that is actually what Satanism fundamentally is as well. You see, real true Satanism holds that the people who adhere to its tenets, which are those of absolute selfishness, they believe that they are gods unto themselves. Okay, they believe they are gods unto themselves, and therefore they have a right to wreak havoc upon the unbegun, upon the masses, the useful idiots, the expendable containers, right? They believe they have this right. They believe they have the right to socially engineer people, okay, which is why socialism and communism do this. The fact that a select few elite people have socially engineered governments, corporations, and whole societies into this self-destructive pattern. Okay, they've manipulated human behavior. They are master manipulators. And they are succeeding. People are being polarized and segregated and atomized. They no longer feel love or empathy for each other.
At populationsecurity.org, you can read the Commission report for population growth. It states,
in proposing the Commission in July 1969, President Nixon said, "One of the most serious challenges by human destiny in the last third of this century will be the growth of population."
With Chairman John D. Rockefeller III, later the commission was titled the Rockefeller Commission Report. In Chapter 10, called The Status of Women and Children, it states,
"If we should achieve a stationary population, women will spend even less of their lives in bearing and rearing children, since family size on the average will be smaller. More women may forego motherhood altogether. For all of these reasons, it would seem good social policy to recognize and to facilitate the trend towards smaller families, by making it possible for women to choose attractive roles in place of or supplementary to motherhood."
Aaron Russo, filmmaker of America, Freedom to Fascism, which can be seen online, reveals his conversation with Nick Rockefeller, who tried to recruit him to the CFR, and gives away the social agenda behind the women's movement.
Well, one of the things they told me was that he was at the house one night, and we were talking, and he started laughing. He said, "Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about?" And I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, you know? And he started to laugh. He said, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Why am I an idiot?" He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded women's lib, you know? And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, "And you want to know why?" He said, "There were two primary reasons." And they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up the family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school, as the officials, as their family, not as the parents teaching them. And so those are the two primary reasons for women's lib, which I thought up to that point was a noble thing. You know, when I saw their intentions behind it, where they were coming from when they created it, the thought of it, I saw the evil behind what I thought was a noble venture.
Why do I choose to do this work? Nothing is more interesting. Nothing is more rewarding. It's as if there's something in us as human beings, women and men, that just from birth says, I have these rights. I have a voice and I have a right to use it. I have a body and the state has no right to it, and no one else does. So as always, if we're inclusive of each other, it ends up helping everyone. It ends up supporting everyone's human rights. I hope in 50 years we see human rights as just part of the culture, that we've absorbed them. So we just assume that we all have the right to freedom of speech. We all have economic rights to food and water and a decent place to live. We all have bodily integrity, women as well as men. We get to decide what happens to ourselves from the skin in. And we won't be able to believe that there was ever a time. We'll be saying to each other, oh, that can't be true, when these rights weren't understood as natural and organic and part of being a human being.
Gloria, at the festival you worked for the Independent Research Service.
That's right.
Well, exactly when did your own association with the CIA start, and in what fashion? Did they come to you, or did you go to them?
In 1958, when I came home from India, I discussed with student leaders, past and present, many of them active with the National Student Association, this kind of small foundation to encourage Americans to go. They thought it was a good idea, too. I was then told by foundations and professors and friends that I should not do this, that I would get in trouble with the House Un-American Activities Committee, the American Legion, all of those 50s people. And I became convinced that it was impossible. It was at that point that the student leaders said to me that they had in the past received funds for international programs from the CIA, and that they felt that this was important and could also be partly funded by the CIA.
Well, I mean, did you feel that you really tried? I mean, did you go around to all of the wealthy private foundations, wealthy private people, and explain your point of view, and explain why you felt it was important that the United States be represented at these things in a certain way? What did they tell you?
They told me that, well, the Ford Foundation, for instance, told me that they thought we were too liberal and too controversial, and that we would endanger their cultural programs in Austria. And the first festival was being held in Vienna. It was not encouraging at all. And the private individuals to whom I went often had particular points of view to put forward, which would have been much, much more restricting than the CIA funds were, which were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
What do you mean they were free? You mean to say it was easier for you to work for the CIA than a private organization?
That's right. And the reason I think that comes as a surprise, as it did to me at the time. I mean, I had the conventional liberals' view of the CIA as a right-wing incendiary group, and I was amazed to discover that this was far from the case, that they were enlightened, liberal, nonpartisan activists of the sort who characterized the Kennedy administration, for instance.
You have not been working now for the CIA since 1962. You still criticize. You were down recently in Washington?
Yes, when the story broke that I had once been, that I have for 4 years been a Central Intelligence agent, I was demonstrating outside the Pentagon underneath Mr. McNamara's office against bombing in Vietnam. And this didn't precisely fit with the image of a CIA agent, but then neither does the CIA.
We can readily see that the women's liberation movement has not been liberation at all. Recall that liberation is a big value of Satanism, but it's about being liberated from the things that actually liberate you, like being liberated from truth, when the truth is what sets you free. Liberation from femininity is not true female liberation, as liberation is authentic expression in alignment to nature. Desiring to be something other than you are is to live in a state of conflict, a form of inner oppression. The reason why abortion is an epidemic, and millions of babies are being aborted yearly in the United States, is because of the social pressure for women to be of equal status to men in the workforce, to inauthentically compete with men, to be ambitious instead of nurturing, and to juggle the rat race of employment and somehow simultaneously raise children. Babies are often aborted for interrupting a woman's career and requiring time they don't have. Things are harder for women, not easier, which is one reason why dependence on the socialist welfare state has grown. Yet, in our traditional past, families were much more independent from the state, and women were under less stress and could fully embrace motherhood comfortably. While education and academia has indoctrinated women, the corporate world is also being overtaken by feminist propaganda. In feminism today, motherhood is deemed as a patriarchal concept and the objectification of woman, as the Eugenics plan seeks to get women to see motherhood as slavery, and their slavery to government in the workforce as freedom. Reminiscent of 1984's Freedom is Slavery. In this article titled Patriarchy Constructs Motherhood, towards the end it states,
Then comes patriarchy with a baby carriage. What this all comes down to is that the motherhood and pregnancy are constructed through patriarchal ideals. Society has deemed women the baby makers, the ones who will produce our next generation, and so on and so forth. As a result, women's bodies become policed by men to ensure that women properly give birth to the next line of soldiers, the next line of businessmen, and the next line of maids.
That was bullshit!
Women abort their babies because of their oppression, not their freedom. We have bastardized the miracle of life, the beauty of femininity, the value of sexual polarity, and the love of family, getting women to think of motherhood as the degradation to breeding machines and incubators.
The smell of death was so strong, it affected me. And I looked at her, and I'm about to faint. Is she about to faint? And I look at her, zombie, robot. These people working in the clinics are affected by abortion. And Planned Parenthood hires young kids. So these young kids are paid well, so they would actually stay at these places to work. But everybody is zombie robotic-like. That's what I noticed. And all of a sudden she takes out forceps, like they're like little tweezers, and she starts digging into this petri dish. And all of a sudden, to my surprise, she takes out a little arm with a hand like this. And she said, "This is part number 1. And the first thing I noticed were the fingerprints on those little fingers. But what really pierced my heart was the head. It had hair, eyebrows, nose, eyes, ears. I even saw a little lash coming out, lashes. But the mouth was open, as if this baby tried to fight for his life. It tried to scream, but nobody can hear him because he did not have a voice, and he couldn't save himself, and he didn't make it. And it was from his own mother and her own womb. And that's where I saw my reality, and I said, wait, I didn't abort 3 sack of tissues. I aborted 3 of my own children. And it hurt, but I was such a coward, and I tried to act strong because I was pro-choice, and I didn't say anything. And the whole day in that clinic, it was a Holocaust. It was me jumping from one room to the next, the next, and the next. The vacuum sound, all day, abortion. It was a human factory of human beings being killed. The girl would go in, she'd have an abortion, head, arms, feet in the garbage, money. Another girl would go in, abortion, head, feet, garbage, money, all day, in a circle. It was a money-making, demonic, satanic place.
Feminists want to blame the patriarchy for desiring a prohibition on abortion. The irony is that such feminists desire the right to murder female babies. A 9-week female fetus has a uterus and ovaries. Is it the patriarchy that wants her to live? The idea that patriarchy is stopping female abortions is nothing more than political theater. Global government is already here, and abortion is being practiced worldwide. It is true that we won't be going back. The corruption of government will expand until inevitable collapse. Many women are speaking out against abortions, as this issue isn't about male politicians wanting to control a woman's body.
The right to abortion is not a real right. My bodily autonomy doesn't give me license to kill, period. We have to change the way we look at this entirely and get that message to everyone.
Patriarchy is conflated with the restraints of morality, and Poison Feminine seeks to destroy the positive values of self-control, the refinement of character, the respect towards mental and moral structure and limitation. And we see this in postmodern academia as the deconstruction of logic, metaphysics, and morality. In universities, saying that something is what it is, the law of identity, is perceived as patriarchal oppression that we should become liberated from. Now, the negative side of the patriarchy does indeed exist in our culture, as the dominator culture is real, but not in the way that people think. And it's not just about men. In fact, the Rockefeller feminist brainwashing is about women becoming the oppressors, controllers, and dominators, as women have a great influence on society. Oppression is about leveraging inequality of so-called rights upon another, but it is not gender specific. We give governments, the legal system, and corporations, made of both men and women, the right to oppress others through fake laws, and we give women the right to oppress their unborn babies through fake laws as well. The very act of abortion is the epitome of domination, as it is the domination upon the most innocent, weak, vulnerable, and helpless of all human beings. Women believe that by participating in the system of oppression and corruption, they are somehow dismantling the patriarchy. But they are supporting the patriarchy by reinforcing the social hierarchy, wage slavery, and economic oppression, political corruption, and corporate greed. It is actually when they are with their children that they are more away from the evil systems of control. The working world is so driven by the reptilian mind that working women cannot even relax into their femininity to feel comfortable to be themselves or become mothers. In the course of real human evolution, we should be moving into a lifestyle of less stress and more peace, not more stress and less peace. The workforce has doubled with the women's movement, yet it commonly takes 2 incomes to raise a family. This is the backwards drain of the system that only brings diminished returns and no real progress. But I digress. After criticizing the women's movement for diluting the notion of witch with ideologies like Wicca and pseudo-modern witchcraft, Xena in The Satanic Witch says, "Women, as in every critical time in our history, are at the forefront of the culture storm now breaking. The woman who grasps and fully understands the mastery of the world inherent in this book's satanic teachings will usher in a true feminism.
The liberation of the demonic in every woman."
Satanic feminism, as depicted in The Satanic Witch, is about unleashing the wild lower beast in woman, encouraging her to be selfish, overly sexualized, lustful, hedonistic, hypergamous, pleasure-seeking, and self-serving.
Time to think about every person's desires, needs, wants, and pleasure. So let's talk a little bit more about pleasure. I keep hearing a particular gripe about this cultural shift, and maybe you have too. Some people have been calling this movement puritanical, or a return to Victorian values where men can't behave or speak sexually around dainty, delicate, fragile women. To these people, I want to say, the current system is puritanical. Maybe men can say and do whatever they want, but women cannot. The current system inhibits women from expressing our desires, wants, and needs, from seeking our pleasure. A world in which I could wear whatever I want, say whatever I want, and express my desire however I want, without fearing for my physical safety or reputation, that would be the world in which female desire and sexuality could have its greatest expression and fulfillment. That world we want to build is the opposite of puritanical. So I'd like to propose one way to continue moving this revolution forward. Let's declare loud and clear, this is what I want. This is what I need. This is what I desire. This is how you can help me achieve pleasure. To people of all genders here with us today, let's find a space where we mutually, consensually look out for each other's pleasure and allow the vast, limitless range of desire to be expressed. Let's make a revolution of desire.
This is a satanic message because there is no love in it. Pop star Miley Cyrus posted this tweet of her collaboration with Planned Parenthood. There was some pushback. In this article by Vice, a Disney-owned company, a woman tells her story of getting an abortion. It starts with this picture and ends with this paragraph.
After the procedure was done, I stood up and a trickle of blood shot down my thigh to my knee, then to my calf. I looked down and promptly vomited. The doctor grabbed some paper towels. In Native American ceremonies, I said, "That's called getting well." I looked down at the vomit splash.
Pretty.
The satanic woman is the woman who gets what she wants, whenever she wants, who pursues her desires without restraint and has no concept of morality, humility, repentance, or innocence. She's totally embedded in her ego and shadow and relishes her power over others. Motivated by lust and power, she uses her sexuality as a tool and commodity to advance herself in the social hierarchy and satiate her desires. She seeks superiority and for men to be her slaves. Ever since the unleashing of the satanic agenda upon our culture, we have seen the gender war, the destruction of relationships, and the rise of broken families. Satanic feminism is not about femininity, but women embodying toxic masculinity, as to embody dominance, competitiveness, and aggressiveness. Her self-loathing is paraded as empowerment, as she cherishes being able to commit crimes inside her womb, saying, "Fuck you" to the victim. We celebrate her choice to sacrifice her children to be able to do what she wants. The path to destroying a society is first corrupting the women's minds, as the women bring life into this world and shape the minds of developing children.
You see, the socialists and the communists and the Satanists knew that by damaging the women, you damage future generations, which is why garbage is being taught to women and girls. Which is why they were never taught the value of men, of the sacred masculine, or the sacred feminine. These principles have eluded them because they were not taught to them. And this is why we're seeing the destruction and degradation of Western civilization. And it is all actually due to social engineering by these institutions. A lot of people want to put the argument forward that this is natural. Okay, that is in women's nature. No, it's part of their darker nature, sure, but it is not absolutely inherent. This idea that we must succumb to our base animal natures is one which has been propagated by the communists and the socialists and the Satanists, okay, the dark occultists.
The wolf has always been a particularly Western European image, and the wolf represents the beast in man. That's what we seek to unleash in humanity, because it's been repressed and tamed by Judeo-Christian values, and that above all is what we seek to eradicate. We can hearken back to Norse mythology where Fenris, the ancient wolf god, was unleashed upon the world, and the Götterdämmerung occurred, the Ragnarok, the end of the world. And symbolically, that is what we are undergoing right now in history, an end of the old order, an end of the old world, and the beginning of a new order.
What we are seeing is the destruction of the divine feminine principle of heart-based care, love, and wisdom. The destruction of Sophia, the destruction of Isis, the destruction of Athena. It is by design of the social engineers that women are becoming less feminine, less kind, less warm, less caring, less gentle, less nurturing, less sensitive, and less supportive, and more bitter, more cold, more bitchy, more hedonistic, more dissociated, and more emotionless. These days, it's harder for women to form loving relationships and families. As much as she believes getting her pleasures satiated is joy, behind the facade, she is actually miserable. For you are either serving in heaven by seeking to be good and repenting for your sins, or you are reigning in hell doing neither. Our culture rejects the divine feminine archetype. We spit on the Holy Spirit, the Holy Mother, and take a shit on the natural law principle of care, and we elevate the slavery of employment over the infinite value of motherhood. Today, more women are unhappy in their so-called freedom careers of wage slavery prison camps that go against their bodies and the natural flow of time and rhythm, yet connecting and loving another soul that has passed through your body is way more aligned to a woman's authentic heart, mind, and soul. We have turned the givers of life into the takers of life. This requires that women dissociate from her feelings and connectedness to others, as there is no deeper connection to another human than to have their little body inside of you. Our culture is one of spiritual emptiness. We have inverted femininity from care to self-centeredness. Just as rights are universal and apply to all, so too does care. When our hearts awaken, we care about others. And when we recognize the law of one, we see the suffering of another as our own suffering. The pro-choice argument says that you should respect a woman's choice to abort, even if that isn't your choice. What they are saying, besides saying that morality is relative, is that you shouldn't care about another person's life, and you should just mind your own business. That you should not care about children who aren't your own. But spiritually and holistically, true care is only universal care, the care for all. Apathy is merely the absence of the divine feminine. Self-love is love for all. Planned Parenthood only pretends to care for humanity as the propaganda of the elites. It really cares about profits for its company and to achieve its anti-human goals. The bond between father, mother, child is a divine one, nothing that a woman's selfish desires can ever replace. For the pursuit of me is the self-destructive path of loneliness and isolation. In our society, we destroy the holy trinity of consciousness. Instead of care, love, and nurturing of the divine feminine, there is rampant materialism, the love of things, and soulless sex, but no real intimacy, no real tenderness, no warmth, no authenticity, no vulnerability. It is no wonder we have such a polarized reaction with the MGTOW movement, men going their own way. The divine masculine archetype has also been corrupted by education and academia in the destruction of the trivium of logic and metaphysics. We live in a world of no principles, of no understanding of rights, ignorant of the objective difference between right and wrong. Our morally relativistic society brings more tyranny each and every day. People don't know how to think methodologically and holistically, nor do they care to learn. A solid logical argument based in metaphysics will not be heard by most. Instead, we hear the constant repetition of debunked slogans of sleeping minds. The child archetype is the integration and birth of the feminine and masculine, representing right action in the world. Abortion cuts off that process, completing the trinity of corruption. In Christianity, the divine child is represented by Jesus Christ, the hero savior and Son of God and the Holy Mother Spirit. But the Christian tale is a dark one, and Satanism is a rebellion from the dark side of this religion, ironically. The perception of man as only a sinner to be punished under the rulership of God maintains a poisoned worldview. If our religious narrative is that Jesus came to earth to sacrifice his life for all the sins of humanity, we carry on this legacy by sacrificing our children at the altar of Planned Parenthood for the sins of humanity. In both accounts, this is false sacrifice, the belief that it is virtuous for someone to die because of the wrongdoings of another. In the case of Jesus, it is the wrongdoings of the order followers of the state who executed him, yet Christians continue to worship the state in the contradictions of their own doctrine. And in the case of aborted babies, it is obviously the wrongdoings of the state and their mommies, and yet our society calls this virtue, calls this a woman's right. And we see the sacrifice of a baby as justified for a woman's freedom. True sacrifice is doing what is right and good, even if it costs us something, like pleasure, comfort, security, and immediate gratification. True sacrifice can be the sacrifice of our own life to save another, or in the defense against tyranny. But sacrificing another person's life and killing them is simply murder, and only done in vain, as there is no justification. And killing from self-defense is not murder, by the way. True sacrifice is for the purpose of saving life, the physical sacrifice of bringing life into this world. But evil sacrifice is simply murder, and if Jesus is all-powerful, he allowed himself to be murdered cruelly, instead of defending himself, and thus we have a culture of victimhood and useless martyrdom, like the false martyrdom of war, as war is based on the fictions of the global elite. Even though we can derive some allegorical meaning from the Christian story to dissect another time, and even though Jesus rose from the dead, the fact that he had to come to earth to die such a gruesome death to save the wickedness of humanity is a dark story. And after his death, the wickedness of humanity still reigns today. The truth is that no other person or being can account for and correct our sins but ourselves, and until we recognize this, our world will continue to get darker. This requires the alchemical inner journey into self-knowledge and understanding the archetypes of consciousness. We have to come to know and transform our thoughts, feelings, and actions individually to redeem and correct ourselves. That is the work to do here on this planet. The New World Order values death. The death of the true living mind, the death of knowledge and understanding, the death of care, the death of love and relationships, and the death of creation, procreation, the birth that springs from the mind and spirit, the death of right action in the world. The secret societies behind our social reality are death cults. This one is called Skull and Bones. Welcome to our satanic world.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
We are literally killing our children and celebrating it. At a pro-abortion rally at the University of North Georgia, they handed out cookies in the shape of fetuses. This pro-life website mocks such celebration with these cookies that look more like aborted fetuses, comparing them to the real thing, saying mocking the deaths of innocent children doesn't seem so funny.
The evidence presented in this video will show that Girl Scout materials and programs are increasingly connecting girls to inappropriate and controversial issues, and activities that contradict the values of many Girl Scout families. It may be difficult to separate your fondness for the Girl Scouts from the bigger picture of the sinful downfall of the Girl Scout organization. Most parents of current Girl Scouts have no idea of the moral upheaval their daughters will be exposed to as they move up through the ranks in the Girl Scout program. Girl Scout programs range from kindergarten through 12th grade. Nor are the parents aware that the donations, merchandise, cookies purchased, and dues that they pay to the Girl Scouts are funding programs and activities that are contrary to traditional family values and support a culture of death. For instance, every girl who pays her annual $25 membership to her Girl Scout troop is made a member of WAGs, World Association of Girls Guides and Girl Scouts. This radical group promotes and advocates a campaign for sexual and reproductive health services, including emergency contraception in order to avoid unintended pregnancies, and accessible, affordable abortions for children as stated on their website. WAGS openly partners with International Planned Parenthood Federation. Girl Scouts USA is WAG's single largest organizational fundraiser.
Ultimately, access to legal abortions make women's lives safer and healthier.
Remember the abortion debate in Argentina? In response, a video called Doom Fetito was created that allows players to shoot baby fetuses, priests, and pro-lifers. Child sacrifice has been an evil practice of many cultures. We think it is absolutely wrong to kill puppies and absolutely right to kill pigs to eat and babies for choice. We see the eugenics social engineering manifest as our self-loathing, self-defeatist, cowardly, wimpy, apathetic, nihilistic culture. While nihilism was supposed to make us strong by giving us free rein to create ourselves as we please, it ultimately made us weak by eradicating the foundation of truth, metaphysics, value, and meaning. For what can be if being itself is darkness? We are lost in the wind with no conviction about anything, as nothingness is the new god of our postmodern dystopia. The anti-natalism movement is a social movement against birth. Here a man wants to sue his parents for having him without his consent. There is also the voluntary extinction movement. These people claim that having children is harmful to the environment, seeing humanity as a virus to the planet. This article claims it is immoral to have children. On mom.com it states that pregnancy is a disease, a sentiment shared by other abortionists. In 2016, David Benatar wrote, "Better to have never been, the harm of coming into existence." In 2017, Joshua Rothman wrote, "The case for not being born." So instead of becoming a moral people living in harmony with the earth, let's just die as the solution. Zero responsibility, zero care to change, total cowardice, and total disrespect for life. We hate ourselves and we hate life, and abortion is going to save the planet, and women who have them are saints. Satanism always twists truth into lie, love into hate. Now it is popular for mothers to regret having kids, which is basically trashing the value of the lives of their children, seeing the act of having children not as meaningful, but as selfish.
On this, new study suggests that childless couples are happier with their relationships than couples with kids.
In the year 2006, for the first time ever, there were more couples without children in Canada than with. This is a gap that further widened in the next census in 2011. With a growing number of Canadians creating a life without children, we've invited a group to tell us what that life looks like. Joining us now, Molly Peacock. She's the author of Paradise, Piece by Piece, one of the first memoirs to address this shift. Bruce Gillespie, professor at Wilfrid Laurier University and the editor of Nobody's Father, Life Without Kids. That's an anthology of essays written by men who have foregone fatherhood. And Leanne Kotler's here. She's a journalist here at TVO with first-hand knowledge of infertility and its effects.
We do have some news.
Working on something.
Little side project.
What? Are you starting a new business? Or?
We're pregnant!
You meant to get pregnant? Yes! Why? Your baby can't understand me, so I'm not going to say hi to it.
She's just joking like an adult because she doesn't like that you're a baby. Hey, this weekend is Connor's 5th birthday. I'd love you to come.
Are there going to be margaritas?
No, he's 5. Here we go, let's try it.
Oh,
Just put your arms around her. It's going to be
God.
good. Just get your elbows real tight in there.
I feel like she's probably peeing on me.
She's not peeing on
Is
you.
she looking for a nipple?
No, she's not looking for a nipple.
How's your vibe? So cute, even her poop was cute. You know, big green long one
when
now.
she makes that face.
Oh, she does a little grunt. She's like, ah. This is the ultrasound of when I was pregnant with Connor. Yeah. Where's the baby? There. That looks like a potato. Oh, look at her, my little burrito. So cute. Can you not ruin burritos for me? Thanks. Are you serious? Can you take your baby outside? My 5-year-old drew this, and the teacher said he is by far the best art student in the class.
It's a vicious cycle. We regress the maturity of humanity so that they never become adults conscious of their sovereignty, and children having children presents all sorts of issues, so people generally don't want to have children as they aren't even psychologically equipped to do so. Our culture has robbed people of the passage to adulthood and the spiritual growth that occurs in parenthood. When you forego the experience of having children, you forego the deepening of your development into altruism, the love and care for others, to be driven by something greater than your individual desires and goals. Even people in the truth movement don't want to have children, and many see it as a crime to bring children into the satanic world of human slavery. Like pro-choicers and materialists, they believe that life is only valuable or meaningful if existing in ideal conditions, seeing the purpose of life as pursuing pleasure and personal satisfaction. However, life is about spiritual growth, which can happen through difficulties, as we all must face and transmute our karma. The purpose of life goes beyond fulfilling our desires into the moral lessons that forge the divine shape of our soul. All life has meaning, as does all circumstance, and every circumstance is subject to radical change. Because of this, we cannot predict the future and condemn life because of those predictions. Ultimately, we transcend our conditions, but the conditions we pass through serve as a school for our souls to learn responsibility, sovereignty, courage, and the difference between good and evil. Opting out of existence on this planet is not evolution for our souls, which through natural laws have determined for us to come here. All preborn babies have a purpose in coming here, and we do not have the right to take that away because of our poisoned worldview. The only way out is through, and no matter how much we want to abort this experience because of the suffering in the present, nihilism is no cure for suffering. Only knowledge, understanding, and spiritual transformation are, and bringing that into action. That is the spiritual journey, and we cannot abort our spiritual destiny. While there is nothing immoral about someone's sexuality and identifications, the global elite are actively pushing their eugenics program to convert the population towards a sexuality that will not produce children, as with androgyny, homosexuality, and transgenderism.
Ontario, Canada, our neighbour to the north, has just passed a law giving the government power to take children away from their families if the parents do not accept the child's chosen gender identity. It basically makes it a form of child abuse.
But basically, let's go back to this line. 1's male, 10's female, right? Your gender can fit anywhere along this line. So, let's say most cisgendered females are usually around an 8. But that's easy enough to understand, isn't it? You can fall anywhere along this line in gender things. You could be sitting on 7.825 if you want, or 2.9873. Basically, it's infinite. There is an infinite amount of genders, which is totally wicked.
The law of gender is being deliberately corrupted, as with all natural laws. The creative, generative, and life principle is being inverted. We must seek to understand the global picture and its correspondence, as without this picture, we cannot make adequate meaning of what is happening. The most controversial political issues are moral issues, but the resolve is not the political dialectic or man's law. It is understanding natural law, what is right and what is wrong objectively. Just as it is wrong to harm your fellow human beings, it is also wrong to believe in falsehoods that support harm. So where you stand on this issue brings moral culpability. In the case of abortion, it is man's law that has changed from what has been understood as naturally immoral to be considered now a right, a false right, for the purpose of eugenics and population control. Once we have infringed upon the rights of another and their freedom, we go against freedom for everyone, as we are all interconnected, as above, so below. Being pro-life is more than being on one side of the abortion debate. It is about being pro-human being, pro-all living beings, pro-evolution, pro-infinite origin, pro-positive, being pro-right, pro-love, pro-existence, pro-consciousness. It is the basis for metaphysics. If we cannot value our children at their youngest age, how can we value anyone else's life? How can we value our own life? It is time to evolve out of this horrible self-loathing. This experience of the total lack of love, true goodness, and true value in our society allows us to learn true love, goodness, and value through apophysis. This world is a lesson for our souls to evolve, to know good from evil. The abortion issue goes so much deeper than meets the eye, because once we dehumanize what a human being is to comfortably kill it as a clump of lifeless cells, through law of mind, mentalism, and the fractal holographic nature of the universe, dehumanization will plague every aspect of life. When we go against life in others, we go against life for ourselves, and our collective conditions continue to become more and more unbearable for life in general. Every moral issue is connected to every other moral issue, as holistic consciousness contains no self-contradictions. We must seek to unlock the key to all, to know that morality springs from the all itself, to release our fear of physical death, knowing that evolution is the continual alignment to what is good, true, and beautiful, in our journey's return to our eternal home. That's it for this 4-part presentation of Abortion, Eugenics, the Satanic, Not New World Order, and Natural Law Anarchy.
All just vibes, baby.